Hello everybody, welcome in to my latest live video. The power is in your hands. I'm Kerry Holzman and I am a working computer technician in the industry over 30 years professionally, sharing with you my experience and my observations, and always, at all times, being practical. Not interested in groupthink or what the fads of groups of people are embracing in some cult-like manner. I'm just here about evaluating parts in use by consumers and businesses, and sharing with you my experience as a technician as to whether or not those parts are worth it, in my opinion, if they involve a lot of time, if they're overpriced, if they're bargains. Because it's one thing to buy something and have it for a couple weeks and then make a review on it. It's another thing to live with that product day in and day out. And if it's a product that you count on and you don't have a backup, like let's say a keyboard. Keyboard seems good, and then 3 weeks later you got a problem after you've done a review and recommended it. A lot of people don't have a spare keyboard, so what do? You got to buy another keyboard, right? You're probably not something you're going to want to mail order online and wait a couple days. It's probably something you're going to go to the store and buy a darn keyboard, because without a working keyboard, you probably find your computer isn't as good. It's usable. So when you're selling hardware to customers or you're selling repair, you're also taking on liability. People are paying you and they expect you to know what you're doing. And if you make a mistake or a part you install goes bad, they're going to call you and expect you to fix that for free within whatever warranty period you have. So, well, I really enjoy computers. It's what I do for fun. The fun of it can go away when there are, when your career is at stake, when your livelihood is at stake. So it does take some of the fun out. But we're going to try and get back to the fun. I've got a machine here that the customer has had a very, very long time. And we're going to get into this a little bit more today. And I'm going to talk about the practicality of repairing something this old. Nothing frustrates me more than watching people trying to take the cheapest way out of something. In most cases, the cheapest way is something that somebody who's very technical, somebody like a technician, can work around some of the shortcomings of cheaper hardware. But most home users who aren't very technical, looking at that cheap price point, end up buying what is essentially a temporary solution in most cases. So, for example, I was looking on Amazon earlier today, and somebody was asking about an off-lease Dell computer that was like $110. If it would be powerful enough to power their security camera software, which they named by name, was 6 security cameras. My instinct as a business owner is that you must not really care about your security if you want to buy an old used computer that's already lived its life and then demand it to be running 24/7 for something as important as monitoring security cameras. It's really hard to take this seriously. Like I've learned to stop answering questions like that, because my answers are usually quite snarky and don't go over well with the person asking. But to me, if you're going to go through the trouble of putting 6 security cameras in, which I'm sure cost over $100, and you want a dedicated machine to monitor those cameras, if the security is at all important, you should build a machine specifically for that purpose, not buy an off-lease computer for $100 and then ask complete strangers if that's good enough for your very specific security software. So that's just the difference between hobbyists and enthusiasts. A hobbyist may want to get away with spending as little as possible with the idea that they're outsmarting everybody, when in fact, they're making their life, in many cases, and in my experience, much, much more complicated, and spending more over the course of, let's say, 3 or 4 years by just keeping that old machine running or repairing it when pieces inevitably fail just by age alone. And then they end up, having to replace an older machine, regardless of how reliable it is, sooner, because it's already got half or 2/3 of its life gone when they bought it. So if they were just looking for something temporary, they were going to do an event. Let's say you were doing an event, Coachella, and you need to set something up and it's only going to be up for 3 weeks. I understand that you need something that can be banged around. You only really need it operational for 3 weeks, and after that it doesn't matter. But if we're talking about a permanent security camera situation, and those security cameras, I'm sure, cost a lot more than the $100 the PC they were looking at. It hurts my head. It just hurts my head. In the long run, to build a computer specific for that purpose, it could last 8-10 years without any problems, or it would be statistically more likely to be trouble-free for a longer period of time and not need maintenance, the kind of repair, rather, or maintenance that an older machine will need. The reason I bring that up is today we have an older machine, and at some point you wonder, is it worth repairing? This is got to be 15 years old, if I had to guess. And this machine was brought to me about 3 or 4 years ago. And it had a lot of extra parts in it that I said, well, these parts are adding a lot of weight. They don't seem to be doing anything. And so I stripped a lot of weight out of it just through removing some of the structure that was in here. And part of it was like a big plastic tunnel that went over the video card, and that video card was obsolete way back when, and we changed the video card out with a GTX 1060, and we pulled all the hard drives out, replaced them with 2 1 terabyte solid state drives. And this machine is primarily used for gaming, not heavy duty gaming, obviously with the 1060, but gaming nonetheless. And the person it was going to, was being gifted, was broker than broke. So they were doing this person a favor and saying, hey, you can have this. So I said, look, I can give it more time, but I don't know how long it's going to last. And it's been solid since I fixed it until last week. Now this won't stay on, and I want to demonstrate the problem. And I've got this little camera. This is the ZV-1 I was shooting yesterday's video with primarily. And the Panasonic camera is now set up as camera 1. The colors look pretty good on the Panasonic today, so I'm going to just roll with it. And when I get back from vacation, I'll get back to playing with the big Canon that I've got, the big Canon camera. So let's take a look, and let me show you some of the limitations that we're dealing with, some of the, as we live day to day and we are embracing this new technology, it's very easy to not really give enough credit for how quickly this technology is evolving. So day to day with the latest Wi-Fi versions, latest graphics card, latest CPUs, latest chipsets, latest USB 4 now is coming out. It all just doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually over time. But when we look back on it, when we go back 15 years to look inside of this computer, suddenly this thing starts looking prehistoric, even though it's only 15 years old. And you'll start seeing the limitations of staying with a machine like this. You know, right out of the gate, this machine was limited because it's pre-built. So a lot of the componentry is custom by Alienware, and there's no regular off-the-shelf parts for the most part that you can just replace the motherboard, for example. It's almost like a laptop in that you can change the storage, you can change the RAM, and and you can change the video card. That's about it. Even this power supply, where do you get a load of it? So let's take a close-up look at what's in here. I have purposely not cleaned this computer because I want you to see how the machines are brought into the shop. This one's actually quite clean, considering it's not a statement on the customer not being clean or not having a clean house. It's just we live in a desert. And also if you have pets, every 6 months, a computer here in Arizona or in the Phoenix area could certainly use a dusting. I tell you that. Very few customers ever dust their computer. So this is typical and normal, and I want to keep everything as real as possible. I shoot these videos live. They're unscripted, they're unedited. I am simply showing you how I do my job, and I hope that this will either inspire you to be able to fix your own computer within certain limits, to understand what's involved time and money wise, and where it makes sense to spend a little more or to save a little bit more, depending on if it's something you just need temporarily or something you want to last indefinitely or as long as possible. There's a pro and con on each side of this. So I'm going to fire up, this is the Sony ZV-1 I was shooting with yesterday. Let's get this fired up and we'll switch over to it and get you some close-up shots of the inside of the computer. So I'm going to step around here, grabbing my mouse with me so I can control my OBS software. And we're going to flip over now to camera 2. Here we go. Okay, so a couple of things. We've got an all-in-one cooler here. And this cooler looks like maybe something's been leaking. I don't know, some buildup on it. We've got some weird proprietary little fan here and another one right up here. And these little tiny fans, they spin super fast. It makes them loud. There were a couple other little things in here back when I first worked on it that I took out, some unnecessary fans. As I mentioned, I took out the mechanical drives, and instead we have these 1 terabyte, 2.5-inch SSDs. If you squeeze the sides, they just spring out. And you can see I've got it in one of those FenLink adapters. And it's really clever that you just slide this in and push it in like a game cartridge. And it locks in. Now you have to understand, these are built on an assembly line. So the good thing about assembly line builds is that everything's designed to come apart relatively simple. But if you notice, we also have another little tiny fan here. These are going to be your fans that are going to be the loudest and also most likely to die, because if they're not getting dusted, the grease and debris gets down into the bearings. And then when you shut the computer off and all the grease cools down, when you turn the computer on the next day or after the weekend, it sort of becomes like a glue and the fan won't spin anymore. That's why leaving a computer on, especially when we're dealing with fans, you're less likely to have a problem like that, because the grease then can be contaminated, but because it never drops below a certain temperature, it just stays fluid. But if you notice on this motherboard, it kind of looks like a normal motherboard, except there's another little board right down here. That's very different, right? This case also had vents that would open electronically. It's a gimmick. It doesn't really do much to help. So we did change the graphics card to a 1060. I can't remember what we had in there. You can see quite a buildup of dust. This is normal and to be expected. Power supply is funky. This power supply is proprietary to this design. It's a standard optical drive up here. We've got 2 sticks of RAM here, 2 sticks of RAM here. This piece that's mounted to the side of the power supply, this provides power to the side panel that has built-in lighting, and that's how the lighting is getting not only power but instructions for controlling color. You know, 15 years ago, that was pretty fancy stuff. And the old way of doing it was you'd have to disconnect a cable. So now there's just a connector, and when you put the panel on, it meshes up against this. So as we bring the computer back around, and I'll show you the front of it close up here, this is your power button. We've got a card reader in there. I don't know if I disconnected that. These things, when they go bad, they're real hassle. They're just better to unplug them from the motherboard and use a USB external card reader whenever you need one. These always go bad. So I don't know what the status of this one is. It could be perfectly fine. What do we have here? I think this, yeah, this lifts up somehow. Says it's a Core i7. This panel I've left alone. That just shows that it glows. And we come around the back. Of course, we've got the fan here. We've got some kind of a block thing. Something here they don't want you using. A couple of USBs, Ethernet, a USB 3. It says, apparently this is an Aurora R4. And there's our service tag number. If we want to go to support.dell.com, we can type in that service tag number and see all the specs of this computer, how it was built. And it's got a separate sound card, which is pretty old school as well. So what I want to do is I want to show you what this machine is doing and give you guys an opportunity to take a guess at what you think it might be. And then we'll try to fix it. I just realized up here there are USB ports that would be very difficult to get to. Look at that. I don't know how you're supposed to see those to get to them, but there they are nonetheless. The release, to release the panels, it's just this release lever right here. There's no screws. See that right here, it shows if it's open or closed through that slot. So anyway, so assembly line builds, you know they're going to snap together because they're built on an assembly line quickly. On the other hand, this complicated mess of wiring in here, I mean, like I said, I'm not even sure we could put a micro ATX board in here, even though this is a full-size case. A full-size motherboard won't fit. This looks like a pretty standard motherboard connector, but I have no idea what this board is over here. So at some point you can spend more money trying to fix these things or to try to convert them to make them standard and not so proprietary. But when you find out how much time and money you're going to have to spend to do it, you might just find out you could just go buy a new computer that's already built, ready to rock and roll with a warranty for the same price, maybe even less. So it depends why you're doing it. If you're doing it for something to do and you appreciate the challenge and money's not the problem, that's pretty unusual, but people do that. A lot of people are trying to stretch a dollar, and if you're using a computer as a novelty, that's fine, but if you're counting on it to pay your bills and stay in touch with family and friends, I'm not quite sure that finding the cheapest possible thing for something that you find so important to your daily life is a pretty smart move. But within reason. I'm also not suggesting you do the big beast build for $10,000 either. So it kind of depends on how important the machine is to you. If it's a novelty or a toy, or is this a tool that's going to affect your quality of life? So just a perspective that I want to share with you and something to consider so that you don't end up spending money getting into this, realizing it's not going to work the way you had planned, and then ending up buying a new machine anyway. And now you've spent even more time and money because you didn't just do that first, you know, the ultimate replacement of it until after you reached a conclusion that fixing this was just too much time, too much money. But you've already spent time and money to come to that conclusion. So ideally, you will come to the conclusion earlier before you make that mistake. All right, let me switch back over to the main camera. Bear with me here just a minute. There we go. And we'll turn this one off and set it down. And let me show you the symptoms of this. Now, I will tell you, we've already got a new machine for this customer in place, and the customer said to me, I don't care what you do with this, I don't want it back. But I was intrigued with the problem. And I'm like, well, I want to try and fix it just for the challenge of it, but within a $100 budget. I don't want to spend more than $100 to fix it. Because this machine, it isn't worth much. So we'll plug that in here. The downside is if the computer is going to cost more to fix than it's worth, there's not a lot I can salvage off of it. I can salvage the solid state drives. I can salvage the RAM, the optical drive. There's nothing else. Oh, the video card. And I suppose the sound card, but I wouldn't, I mean, onboard sound on motherboards is probably better than this card today, at least on some boards. So I wouldn't even bother with that card. Everything else would go in the recycle bin. It's a proprietary power supply. It's a proprietary case design. It's large in that it's very long. It's extraordinarily heavy. This cooler, I don't know what kind of life it's got in it, but we got bigger problems than the cooler to worry about for right now. And even changing that cooler to a different cooler, I suppose we could go with another, what is this, a 140 millimeter radiator or a 120? I'm not even sure. Or maybe pop an air cooler on there. But to replace it with the same cooler, with the Alienware logo, and to utilize the, whatever this wire is here, that's all proprietary Dell design. That's not an industry standard plug. Whatever this is, I've never seen it before. So we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Just be prepared to cross that bridge. All right, so I need a keyboard and a mouse to plug in here. I'm not going to describe the problem to you. I'm going to show you the problem. Everybody has, you know, when you're in this business, customers explain things quite uniquely. So I'm kind of curious how you guys would explain the problem. So I'm just going to show you the problem, and you can put into your words how you would explain to a technician what it is that's wrong. I just want to get this a little more this way. Okay. Put my keyboard here. I'll put my mouse over there. Grab my keyboard. Martin says it's an antique. You might as well throw the Magna Carta away. It's pretty old. Then there's people out there, if they saw this at the curb, they would pick it up thinking, hey, somebody's throwing away a perfectly good computer. And then they'll be on some help forums going, did anybody tell me how I can fix this? You know, now they're taking other people's time. My microphone. It was a mic drop moment. Okay. There's no point in me even activating this HDMI input. Let me just show you. We're going to hit the power button here. We're going to make sure power's in, keyboard's in, HDMI cable's in, and I'm going to hit the power button. Hello, computer. Step around this side. Make sure I'm not missing anything. It's completely dead. Well, it wasn't dead before. Make sure that's in there good. We're plugged in here, plugged in there. Power. Okay, well, maybe no, maybe not. This would be easy. Most people would say it doesn't turn on, right? But sometimes people would say it doesn't turn on, even though it does turn on and it just doesn't boot. They don't know the terminology to explain it correctly. But all that buildup and then nothing, you know? Wait, what's the deal? Make sure my drives are in there okay. Let me make sure that this connector is plugged in all the way. It should just turn on. I'm missing something. Well, that's completely dead. That is completely dead. This is not what it was doing before. So I'm wondering if I made a mistake. That can happen, you know. Let me just try something here. This power supply has a giant single modular plug on the back of it. Now what's cool about that is changing the power supply should be pretty easy, right? You just take out 4 screws, 1 plug, but you have to find the exact power supply because you're never going to find another power supply that uses a plug like this. This is uniquely Alienware. And what that does is it reduces your options as far as what power supplies are available at what wattage. And without competition to provide alternatives, they can charge anything they want to. Here we go. So there's like a little reset button down here, and when I push it in, system fires up. See that? As soon as I let go of that little reset button back here, little teeny tiny button. So what I suspect what was happening, and I'll just tell you now since it's not doing it, is when you'd hit the power button, the machine would start up and then within about 5 seconds shut back down. And if you reach back here and held that button in, the machine would stay on. Oh look, the vents opened and closed. Isn't that cute? So I said, okay, I think it's probably a power supply. So I went online to see how difficult these power supplies are to acquire and how expensive they are. Because again, it is a proprietary design, which once I get this connector out one more time, I can show you a close-up of it here. Oh, and my mistake. That's not screwed into the side of the power supply. That's screwed into the shroud around the power supply. So there I was thinking I was going to have to reattach that. Okay, so you can see how easy it is to take the power supply out on these. I'm listening to something rattle, but it's this captive screws. I've already unscrewed it, obviously, off camera, but I haven't done anything else. I needed to take it out so I could see this side of the power supply that has all of the details of the make and model. It's not going to focus, is it? Okay. And essentially, this power supply is used on a lot of Dell higher-end machines. I believe it's 850 watts, and the model number, that's the one thing I don't like about this Panasonic camera, is it doesn't do a very good close-up focus. So let's do it this way. Let's bring up the little Sony ZV-1, because this will do the close-ups real good. There's my power button. And let's open, or rather let's control OBS here by turning camera. We'll turn camera 1 off. There we go. Now let's take a look if we can see this in focus this time. So the model, it says, is an H875EF, and it shows, what I had to search for to find it is this model over here that says J556T. So even though the model says H75EF, it was actually listed as J556T. And it's used on a number of different machines, and if you Google that, you can see they're available and they're quite pricey. It's listed as an 80 plus power supply, silver, and that's back in the day. So let me bring this back out and go back to camera 1. Kind of hard working this way. Okay. Very good. Now, there's a little fascia on here. There's a couple of screws here and here to remove the plastic surround from this. And let's go ahead and just take that out right now. It'll just take a second. And I'll get my glasses so I can see. These are like little fan screws, like what you'd use on attaching a case fan. They're just a little shorter. All right, so that's the housing. I probably should pay attention to which side is up on that. And then here's our power supply removed. I'm assuming we've got a bad power supply. Now, as I mentioned, I went on eBay because looking at Amazon, the prices were way too much money. And I bought the same model of power supply. I didn't know it was going to come with cables. So what I got in the mail is exactly this. Pretty unusual, I think, that they included the harness. I guess that's kind of a nice thing if you had a bad wire somewhere on your harness. That's definitely a proprietary harness if I've ever seen one. But there's nothing wrong with our harness. And looking at the power supply, looking at the model number, we've got the same model number here. But I am noticing that the other power supply has the surrounds, this little pieces that stuck out for mounting the plastic cover to. And let me just set this in here for a minute. I'm assuming that's gonna, this power supply has this plastic thing underneath it. My power supply doesn't have that. So this was clearly used in a different build. That's going to keep us, this little plastic piece, this is like a routing thing for cables. This power supply does not have that. So even though we've got the exact same model of power supply, you can see the case design is slightly different. So this is not going to go in. I don't think it's going to go in with that on there. I remember this piece has to go to the side. That means this is going to be on the bottom, and I think there's no room for it. What's happening is I'm hitting the bottom of the case with this piece. Now this piece is probably clipped in, but I can't really tell. So automatically we're already getting involved in this time-wise compared to a normal power supply replacement. Because number one, I couldn't just, well, I could go buy a power supply on Amazon if I wanted to drop 200 bucks on it. But ordering it from eBay means I have to wait longer. I don't have that peace of mind on returns like I do with Amazon when I buy from eBay. And then the power supply arrives a little bit different than what I was expecting. And I'm not quite sure how this piece comes off. And I also want to inspect if this has a frame on it. Ah, it does have a frame. So right here, there's a metal frame that has to come off. So let's take the frame out. There's a couple ways we can deal with this. So first things first, let's take this frame out. Again, this is all added labor. It's one thing if you're just kind of messing around. It's another thing if you're charging a customer for your time. And then when you add in the cost of parts and labor, are you really doing your customer a service by offering to fix it, if it's even fixable? I don't even know that doing all this is going to resolve the problem. I'm just taking an educated guess. I do see 2 holes here, which is likely where this piece goes through, which is optional, obviously, depending on what case this is going in. So this power supply didn't have that. But what I can do is I can either break this off, I can remove these screws and take this piece off and replace them, or take this piece off and break the clips that's holding it in. Of course, I have to break the seal that says guarantee void if removed. Okay, that's not legal. It's not legally enforceable. If you ever see something that says if you open it, you void the warranty, that is not enforceable. Congress has, here in the United States, made it very clear that you cannot sell something to a customer and then tell them if they open it, they're voiding the warranty. So just because it says guarantee void if removed doesn't mean that's legally enforceable. Also, these parts are so old, there's no warranty left on them anyway, but let's go ahead and take out, I'm kind of curious now, what's holding this little blue piece in. And all these screws are different. So the screws that hold the plastic faceplate versus the metal frame versus the power supply case, 3 different, completely different length and style of threads on those screws. So you don't want to mix and match them up. Mix them up, rather. And I would think that we can just open that by lifting it. Let me just double check. Grab something. Grab my flat blade and see if we can open this up. You can very easily bend this metal, so we don't want to apply too much force. We just want to try and coerce it. There we go. So that piece lifts up, and now we can see those little clips that are holding that blue piece in. So even though I could snap it off, the problem is these little plastic pieces would then be flying around, floating around inside of the power supply. And even though they're not conductive, I don't want to hear something rattling around, especially on a repair I just did. That's not a good sign to the customer that you had any idea what you were doing. This is a cleaner way to make it right. And this could all be for nothing. This could be a waste of money on the power supply. This could be a waste of my time putting all this effort into it for a machine that's already 15 years old. However, if this fixes it, you know, this machine's good for the remainder of the life of Windows 10. It's not going to be Windows 11 compliant. I'm pretty sure it's not going to be. We'll double check that. So in any event, I just needed to remove that piece there. And now we can put this piece back on. Now, something the camera's probably not picking up is there's a little lip here, and it's got a cutout like a tab. And it's got to fit into the slot and slide in. So I want to put this in first. You more or less have to bring it straight up and align it with the slot, and then we can, once we have it lined up in the slot, we can bring it forward and then close it. Then we can put the 2 screws back in that we're holding it down. Now we have the frame to put back on. Remember the frame. And that now brings us into problem number 2, which I've only just now realized. This power supply, this piece of it, doesn't have the screw holes for this frame. Look at that. If you notice on this power supply, you'll see the hole here, the 2 holes at the bottom, and that's so that this will align, and then those screws will go in and hold this frame down. Now, just looking at these power supplies side by side, they have the same, oh no, I'm putting it on the wrong side. Never mind, forget I said anything. Yeah, I think I was trying to put the frame on this side. Okay, that's the wrong side, Carrie. We gotta put the frame on this side. Whew, that makes more sense. All right. You never know though, because this power supply is used in so many different Dell models. There could be different frames or like pieces like this that accommodate different case designs. So I immediately jumped to assuming this power supply case didn't have the holes, but I was on the back side of it, or rather the front of it versus the back of it. So that's my bad. So let's go ahead and put this back on. Silly me. Once stuff like this starts happening, you just start expecting it. It's like, oh, here we go again. No, that one was on me. That's all right. Just making sure you're paying attention. And in this piece, we'll go on like that. What am I forgetting? What did I take these little screws out of? I've already forgotten. Where did those come from? My short-term memory is gone. I think I'm already on vacation. I think I've already left. What the heck did I just pull those from? I'm sure you're going to tell me in the chat room. Nobody in the chat room said anything yet? What did I just pull those little tiny screws from? I can't believe I just did it and I can't remember. I gotta rewind my own video. From the blue plastic. Blue plastic. There were no screws holding the blue plastic in. Power supply panel you pulled off, the side cover, the top, the plastic clip, the base. You know, I don't feel so bad that I don't remember where I just pulled those screws, because not one of you has said the same place twice. The underside of the cover, the underside of the cover. I'm confused, because if that goes on like this, and that, oh, I see. Okay, so what throws me is there's screws in here. They're captive, okay? And what they're gonna do, they actually don't screw into anything in the back of this power supply. They go all the way through, and they're gonna lock into the case through these holes here. But then this piece will just fall off. So those little screws, they went to this black plastic piece, and they secure it to the power supply so that you can pull the whole thing out as one piece. I get it now, I see. It's all making sense now. So no computer that you build out of regular modular components would have a similar assembly or repair process to this. As a result, look, if you're a Dell authorized service technician, you've seen these probably in the hundreds, and you're probably like a robot. And you're like, well, duh, Carrie, you just have to put it in because that's what you work on all day. But this is not an industry standard. as a result, I'm going to be a little bit clumsy with it because I'm used to industry standard and I prefer to build my machines with industry standard parts. Now, as I mentioned, this connector has to face this side. This cable's very short. It only goes in one way. There's two tabs, one on each side and then one in the middle. And so in order for that to be oriented with that on the, what I'm going to say is my right side, I know that the power supply goes in this direction. And then I can just push it back, bring the big modular connector down, line it up, and plug it in. So, well, that is a pain in the butt. At least I didn't have to recable everything and reroute or rerun any cables. Just having that one connector sort of made up for it, for the extra work we just had to do. And then this piece just screws into the back. It looks like Dell already bought Alienware when this was purchased, with the power supply having the Dell logo on it. Now I'm kind of curious if that fixes it. If this doesn't fix it, then you really have to wonder if it's, you get into the situation where you're like, well, I already spent this much, I might as well spend more. Or you say, I'm going to cut my losses and take it as a lesson learned and kick this thing to the curb ASAP. So let's find out which attitude I'm going to have based on the results. I just have to know, right? I just got to know, is this the problem? The machine has been ultra reliable since I rebuilt it. I refurbished it. I took quite a lot of unnecessary hardware. There were some fans it didn't need. It had like fans vertically here that were a complete waste of time. And it also is very, very heavy, and I was hopeful to drop a few pounds off the case by removing the unnecessary, or what I thought was unnecessary hardware. And it's been great. So let me hit the power button now. Oh, well, that's not good. So look at that. It's the exact same problem, which is pushing this connector in is turning the machine on and off, but the power button isn't doing it. So again, the way the machine came in, you'd hit the power button and the machine would fire up, and then after about 4 seconds, shut itself back down again. So there's something a little freaky going on here. Fans, there's at least one fan that sounds like it's going out, or it could be the liquid pump. That's absolutely fascinating and not what I was expecting. Geez, I hope I didn't put the old power supply back in. That'd be brutal. Let me just double check here. Now, I know this is the old power supply because it doesn't have the guarantee void if removed sticker on it, so yeah. But that's something you can do, right? If you're not paying close enough attention. I'm trying to talk to you guys while I'm working, and I'm very easily, my mind is all over the place, and so I've lost my place. So let's turn on the HDMI input. And let's take camera 1 and put it in a corner. So that means whatever I paid for the power supply and the amount of time that I've had the computer sitting here, the amount of time I spent taking the old power supply out, researching, finding a replacement, paying for it, waiting for it, getting it, installing it, has made zero difference. It's all been a complete waste of time and money so far. So we're not off to a good start. What I'm curious about is if I manually hold the button in, if it will post. It's not looking good. So also a little correction, this little catch back here, this locks the, this doesn't release the panels, it unlocks them. And then you lift this back fin and that releases the panels. It's kind of a little hidden lever there. But we should have posted by now, we should have seen something. So this immediately, in my opinion, was a power supply problem. It has all of the symptoms of a bad power supply, but clearly what appears to be happening is something the power supply is plugged into appears to be causing a short circuit, and that's why I can override it with that button. But in doing so, I'm overriding the protection and could be inviting damage or more damage if there's damage already. So if we take a look at what's plugged in here, we can unplug anything that requires power that isn't necessary for the computer to boot. So we obviously have to have power to the graphics card, but we don't have to have power to the DVD drive. We also don't need these hard drives. We'll just leave those out, which is the same as unplugging. We've got the fan, the liquid pump. We've got another circuit board up here, which looks to be controlling the vents and some RGB. And we really don't need the sound card, but that's typically not where the problem would be. And the other thing we can check that can cause a problem like this is a CMOS battery. I've seen these pre-builts where when the CMOS batteries go, the system won't boot anymore. Where is the BIOS battery? I'm sure it's got one. I don't see it. Typically, a BIOS battery is located towards the bottom of the board, but I don't know what this breakout board is for. Doesn't seem to have a battery either. Interesting. I'm just kind of curious about this card reader. It shows the card readers back here, and this cable right here is coming out of the card reader, and it's going into this board right here. So that's got to be just a standard USB port right there. What a strange little motherboard. We have a power cable here as well. Huh. Getting no response out of it at all. So now the question is, can I override this power button and use one of my external power buttons? Well, the problem is you got to figure out where the heck this power button is cabled to. Now, looking at these fine little cables coming down right here, we can trace them down, follow them down, and they also go into this little motherboard. This little motherboard has a ton of little connections on it. And I imagine our power connector's in here somewhere. So locating it, obviously I can use Google, I can look at YouTube, I can see if somebody's already done this years ago, but it does kind of take the fun out of it. For me, there's a bit of enjoyment, almost like a game, to figure the things like this out. Now, we could also have bad RAM modules, and we could pop the RAM out, at least pop out half of it. I don't even know what this has. This is a 4 gig stick that looks like DDR2. Maybe it's DDR3. It's probably DDR3. Typically, RAM won't cause an issue where the machine doesn't turn on, like what we're experiencing. I mean, it's sounding like it wants to start. Let me change my video input over back to HDMI 1 and take a look. Bring this back over here. Joe says, I feel happy. Zoran thinks we probably have a GPU issue. Yeah. QAZ there in the chat room thinks we should disconnect the cooler. Well, we're not getting a post. That much we know. And the fact that that little button on the back of the power supply has to be pressed to keep power flowing suggests to me that something's triggering the power supply to, for safety reasons, to shut down. So overriding it is not a great idea. No way, that one's just permanently up, I guess. Yeah, I mean, a bad video card, anything that's electronic that could be causing a short circuit would be what I'm looking for. We could pull the motherboard out of it and work on it on a bench, but I'm not quite sure that we could put a micro ATX board in here with a standard power supply. We might be able to, but it means these vents aren't going to work anymore. This just happened one day, everything was working fine, and then one day it just started this. So whatever it is, it wasn't because the customer made any changes to the machine. They didn't like recently upgrade the RAM or open it up and blow the dust out of it, or, you know, it pretty much just sat ignored. Well, not ignored, but it was used every day, but it wasn't maintained. So that's pretty typical. Most people don't maintain their computers. I'm okay with that. That's given me a career in fixing computers for people. So for those of you watching this video, I assume you're watching because you don't want to have to hire somebody like me to fix your computer for you, and you'd prefer to not have your computer break to begin with. And regular maintenance, like dusting the machine out and things like that, can help prevent these problems, although can't guarantee the problem's not going to happen simply because you're maintaining, but you're putting the odds in your favor that it's not going to happen. Let me find another graphics card, just something cheap we can throw in there for fun and giggles. What do I have? What do I have? Something small we can chuck in there. This will do the job. This is a GT 740. Oh, did my camera go out? I know my audio is still broadcasting, but my camera, what happened to my camera? Why not use onboard video? I don't think this has onboard video. Yeah, this motherboard doesn't seem to support onboard video, even though the chip might have it. I don't even know what chip it has. So let me figure out where did my camera go? I'll tell you what, guys, I'm gonna go full screen on camera 1 here. It's telling me it's got no signal, so I wonder if I might have pulled the cable by mistake. Let me just double check. The camera is on. Everything is functional. Something with still no signal there. Let me pull. Oh yeah, there it goes. Okay, I don't know what that was all about, but I'm walking on the cables as I walk across this floor, and if the cable's tight and I step on it, it might pull it, and that's not good for the connector on the back of the camera or the connector on the back of the expensive capture card. I like to have a little slack in there, so I apologize that happened, but it's resolved now. Now I could pull this sound card out, but this is just an old. This is his old graphics card. This is the GT740 that we'll use for testing. Just a pretty basic card here, except it's DVI out, and that's all right. I can put an adapter on it, I guess. Yeah, that'll be fun. So we'll pop this in here. It's got to have power, so we'll give it some juice. And we need a little DVI to HDMI adapter. Sure, I have one in this drawer. Got it. We'll put that on here. And the HDMI cable onto that. Then we'll put, notice I always work with the power unplugged. Still not turning on, which I didn't expect it would, but you never know. And we'll try this again. Put myself up in the corner. Activate the HDMI input. And I'll hold this little button in. Oh, my hand was covering the vent, so I heard something grinding there for a minute. It had me concerned. I'm like, that's a new sound. But yeah, probably a good idea not to put my hand on top of that when the vents are opening. So gimmicky. So the fans are running full speed. Normally they'll do that at initial power on, and then once the system begins to post, you'll hear the fans quiet down. The fact that we're not getting to the fans quieting down part of the power on suggests to me that we certainly don't have a power supply problem. We're getting the same symptom, so we can scratch that off the list. We don't have a video card problem because we've swapped the video card, and we can scratch that off the list. Now some people say, well, you're just part swapping, you're not fixing anything. Here in America, hourly labor rates cost more, far more than the parts themselves. So typically, when you need something fixed on your car, a water pump, an alternator, or on your computer, they just pull the old one, pop in a new one, or rebuilt one because it's cheaper and it's faster. In the case of like water pumps and alternators, we ship those out to an underdeveloped nation a lot of times because the labor's real cheap, and those people there have jobs they would not ordinarily have available, so it gives them an opportunity to earn money that they wouldn't have had otherwise. We're saving money by shipping it out, letting a cheaper labor rebuild them, and then they'll ship them back and resell them as rebuilt alternators and water pumps. With electronics, for the most part, we don't do that. If a board needs to go to a recycler, it's typically stripped of any precious metals, and the rest of it's just destroyed and put into a landfill. So the idea of breaking out an oscilloscope and a soldering iron here in the States, it's a skill that doesn't really exist much anymore, at least in consumer repairs of electronics. There's still a handful of people that do those kind of repairs, but even then, those repairs are generally only on really, really expensive hardware that's worth paying the American labor rates to fix. So a lot of the PC stuff is so competitively priced. It's just cheaper and faster to get something new, but you might have a very expensive iPhone or something that would make sense to pay for a repair. Let me go back full screen again on camera 1 here and just kind of take another look on the inside, see if there's anything obvious. Typically, a problem that's as serious as this one, as obvious as this one, a lot of times what's wrong with it can be obvious as well. So what we know so far is that the machine, the power supply rather, won't stay on, and it won't even trigger on with the power button, and it was doing that before. So that suggests to me that there is a short circuit or a loose cable. Something's not quite plugged in all the way, or a component has burned out. That's part of the chain of the flow of the electricity, and so the electricity can't get past it. It's like a little, think of it like a blockade. If we can identify what the bad part is and pull it, it's an easy repair. But if the bad part is one of the surface mounted components on the board, it's not, I mean, it's on borrowed time as it is. We have our 8-pin CPU power connector up here. Just want to make sure that's plugged all the way in. This cable goes to a fan. Oh, you know what I did? I can see. I had taken this off and replaced the rear fan with a Noctua fan. That's a Noctua cable. And I can see the brown corners. I think that's a Noctua rear case fan. Yeah. So that was one of the upgrades I did to it, was change this fan out on the radiator when I had it years ago. I completely forgot about that. And that plug, I could probably grab it with these though. Let's see. Or not. Got it. And then down here, I have a battery tester. Right here. And these testers are sold on Amazon. They're under a bunch of different manufacturer names, but they're all the same. And all I have to do is take a button cell, kind of put it in on an angle right here. And we're at 100% on that battery. It is absolutely 100%. So I must have changed this battery a few years ago when I had the machine here. Still, removing the battery could help if we have a BIOS corruption issue, to let the power drain out of it. With the power unplugged, obviously. We can put the original video card back in. And my HDMI cable can go back on right there. And then we have to give power to the video cards. We'll put power back on it. Plug the power cable back in. No, nothing's changed. Oh, you know what? Okay, it's working now. That's interesting. That's promising. Will it post? With some of the RAM out of it, it may not post with just the 2 sticks of RAM in the slots that they're in. That could be a new problem. There's a button right here I didn't realize. There's a button right here, and then there's the big alien head. I was using the alien head to power it on, but the little button right here does show a little power connector or a power symbol. Oh, look, we got some text on the screen. That's interesting. So, isn't it interesting how at a moment we go from giving up hope to hope being renewed, that it's salvageable. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the power cable on it and put the other RAM modules back in it. I can also go ahead and screw the video card back down. Why not? Let's be confident and completely jinx it. All right. So now the question is, was it maybe a corrupt BIOS? Was it a stuck switch? I don't know. However, as long as it works and we get to the end result, then we'll end up with a working machine. Now, if I end up with a working machine, I'm going to tell you this puts me in a kind of an awkward position because it's way too heavy to ship this. But I would certainly be open to selling it to somebody locally, and it'd be sold in an as-is condition, and then if they wanted to replace the cooler or do any other work to it, that would be entirely on for them to decide. Like I said, it could defeat the whole purpose of buying a machine cheap if you're going to turn around and put a bunch of money into it to make it work. This is not going in like it's supposed to. There it is. Okay. And then the RAM. I'll put the RAM back in. RAM went this way. Four gig PC3 12600. So DDR3. 4 sticks, 4 gigs each, for a total of 16 gigs. Okay. Make sure that's fully seated. Once again, with the power cable, you can plug that back in now. The whole system just fires up all on its own. It's eager to start. The sleeper has awakened. Oh, look at that. Well, would you look at there? What does it say? The amount of system memory has changed. Press F2. Okay. Okay. 2013 is the build date? Oh, that's of the BIOS. That's 9 years ago. Save changes. No. Is there a restore defaults? That's what I want. Then save changes and exit. Okay, let's see if we can boot to the desktop. Frank Jimmy says, I'll give you $3.50. $3.50. Daryl May says the graphics card is worth more than the entire machine. Well, we don't know that. I mean, let's see what processor it's got. I'm also curious about what temps that processor's running to determine if that cooler's working, because it's a little noisy. It is alive. So did I need to replace the power supply? I'm starting to doubt that we did not have a power supply problem and that this maybe could have been fixed. Maybe. We have a ton of icons here. What I'm going to do for courtesy is right-click, View, and Show Desktop Icons. I'm going to uncheck that just to give the customer a little privacy here. We're not plugged in to the network, so he's obviously got it logging in. Like I said, this computer was used for streaming, for gaming, so he's logging into my brain today is fried. Well, BattleNet, but that's a part of whatever. Okay, let me just see what the specifications are of this machine. So let's go to start. Start menu is not coming up. I can't read that error message. It's too small for me to see. Ah, there's my start. All right, so let's go to, let's close. Can I close this? Close. Well, you know this person was using Steam. That's what I was trying to think of, Steam. They're logging into Steam. Every time the system starts, it's the first place they want to go every time. That's the primary function of this machine. I want to get rid of that search highlights. It bothers me. Search highlights off. And let's go to the control panel. It's a little laggy. Whatever it's doing, it shouldn't be taking this long to open a control panel. And let's go to do that. Let's go to System. I don't know what is taking so long, but everything I just typed took that long to appear. System information. So we're going to need to do a wipe and a reinstall of the OS. That's clear. All right, let's see what we got in here. I think this loaded in 4K because everything is super tiny. Yeah, I sure did. Let's drop it to 1080. Okay. Intel Core i7-3820. So it's a third generation Intel. We've got 16 gigs of RAM. We've got the two 1 terabyte SSDs. And we've got the, what is that, a 1060 SC graphics card. So that's the gist of it. So third generation Intel is not going to be compatible with Windows 11. And I am just kind of curious if the CPU is running hot or not, if that liquid cooler is in fact working. I think it's working. But until we push it hard, you know, the CPUs, they throttle themselves when they get too hot. So you could have a pump that's not working that you don't even realize isn't working. No, I do not have this connected to the internet. When you're diagnosing a machine, you don't want to plug in flash drives or printers or the internet. You don't want anything that's not necessary, because it could be any of those items that are causing the problem, or what they're plugging into that could be causing the problem. So like the Ethernet part of the board, if that's the problem, then by activating that or shorting out something in a USB port could prevent the whole system from booting. So when you're diagnosing, you don't want to have anything plugged into it other than, say, a keyboard, mouse, power, and a monitor. That's it. Now, it's going to need a clean install of Windows 10 for sure. this belonged to Jason, as you saw on the screen, and that Jason has a whole new computer now, and he's good to go. He just reloads his game off of Steam, reconfigures. I don't even think he reconfigures email. I think he just uses Gmail, I think. Anyway, it was super easy to get him into a new machine. Like I said, they didn't want this one back, and I was just curious what was wrong with it. And it turns out I probably jumped the gun by assuming the power supply. I think there was nothing wrong with the power supply, that something else was happening here that was causing this problem, and it could have been a BIOS corruption. And I have seen that about a half dozen times, maybe a little bit more. I see it about once every 3 or 4 years on average. A system will come in where somehow the BIOS is corrupted. I had a customer bring me a machine I built where the BIOS not only corrupted, but the machine, wouldn't turn on. The fans would spin and the lights would come on, but it wouldn't post. And I was messing about with it, and suddenly something on the screen said, "Your BIOS is corrupted. Do you want to restore from your backup BIOS?" This was a gigabyte motherboard with a dual BIOS. Never have I ever seen that. I said, "Yes, please." And it reflashed the main BIOS with the backup BIOS and rebooted, and the machine is still running today. That was years ago. So some power fluctuation, maybe some electromagnetic pulse from a lightning bolt strike nearby. No idea. That is so weird. And the customer said, "I don't know, it was working fine and now it won't turn on." So I've never seen that since, and I never saw it before. And it's one time where the backup BIOS actually came in. Gigabyte advertises the heck out of the dual BIOS feature, and I've only ever actually used it once. Nicholas Bernard just contributed 10 Canadian dollars. He says, "Good afternoon, good day, good night to you. I just finished a game of Age of Empire 2 with my friend. What a blast in the past. Did you ever play that game?" No, I didn't play those. That's like an RPG game, I think, isn't it? I was more into your Doom, Duke Nukem, Unreal Tournament. If you want to keep going back, King's Quest, Leisure Suit Larry. You want to go back further, Zork. Mostly games for me were like arcade style games. Wing Commander. Construction says, "Don't scrap it, it's a decent giveaway." Yeah, I think storm last night. And surprisingly, nothing went down. Today has been a pretty calm day and quite hot outside. So for whatever reason, I look over and all the lights are out on the cable modem. So the ISP must have been doing something. I don't know what just happened. So I have lost complete internet connection to the chat room. I couldn't talk to you guys. And hopefully this is back to streaming. Refresh the page, see if we get back online here. I have no idea if this is going out right now. It should be. Yeah. Okay, so I'm back. I had to refresh. So the internet went out here. Like I said, it should have gone out during the storm. That's normally when things like that would happen. Severe winds, heavy rain, downpouring, and we didn't even have so much as a power brownout or anything. But now the weather's great, and it just went down for no apparent reason. So appreciate you guys hanging in there. Murphy's Law, you fix one thing, something else breaks. But that's purely coincidental and nothing to do with anything we're doing here. I think this computer just went to sleep on me, didn't it? Yeah. So let me shut this down for right now. What I will do is see if there's any data the customer wants on this before I wipe it out. And then I'm going to run Prime 95 on it and see if the cooler's working. And if it is, then what I'll do is you clean up the dust on it, clean install of Windows 10, all the updates, drivers, optimization tool, and find somebody here locally that I can sell it to cheaply. It'll be a good computer for a couple of years, but you know, like I said, it'll cost more to ship than it's worth, so we won't ship this. Joseph says it's pouring outside there in New Zealand. Yeah, I don't think your weather has much effect on our weather here, but good to know. Is this thing not shutting off now? What's going on? What is this thing doing? It's powering back up, even though I told it to shut down. Interesting. No idea why. So I'm going to pull the plug on it. I don't know what it's doing. Don't care. It works. Anything else is easy. Everything beyond this is easy. We've done the hard part. So that was an interesting experience, and that's why I like showing these repairs live, without the edits, without scripting, without, you know, turning everything into a TikTok video for people with short attention spans. What ends up happening is when you're only seeing all the edits, all of the major things that are happening, and we cut out all the things that didn't work, then the education you're getting in return becomes, the nutritional value of that information is diminished significantly. So many people, especially in the younger generation, they just want the answer. Why do you have to explain the answer? Because the answer is going to be different every time we're diagnosing a machine. I want you to understand what we're looking for. I want you to understand why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And I want you to understand and expect that it's pretty unusual that the first thing we try is the resolution to the problem. That's normal. We take our best guess, and the guess is based on our experience. If you have a lot of experience, your guess is probably going to differ from somebody who's got no experience. If you're only fixing one computer, what difference does it make? But if you're doing it for a career and you're fixing 3 or 4 a day, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, then in theory anyway, you're more likely to get your first diagnostic, what you suspect to be the problem, you're more likely going to hit that far more often than a hobbyist who rarely does it. They do get lucky from time to time, and techs get lucky from time to time. But when you average it all out, a lot of the same symptoms that this computer displayed would be fixed with a power supply. So based on my experience, I just went ahead and ordered the power supply without spending too much time on it. Now, if this was the only computer I had, I didn't have any money, I wasn't going to order a power supply because it was going to cost $65 or whatever I paid on eBay, then taking it apart with nothing to lose and having all the time in the world with no pressure would have probably led me to whatever fixed this and saved me the money. But based on my experience, statistically, that's unlikely. It does happen, as you've just witnessed, but that's not common. So what you should take away from this, that's what you saw me do to fix this isn't normal, typical, it's not common, but it's possible, and it does happen. But the reasons why I was going after certain components like the power supply, the video card, and the RAM is when we're talking about the system posting, those are your 3 major components that can prevent a post more often than not. But what also can prevent a post can be a USB flash drive or something you've plugged into the USB port that's gone bad. It could be an external hard drive you've plugged in, and now your system takes a minute or 3 minutes to boot when it used to take 15 seconds, and you're trying to figure out what's wrong. And what's wrong is you have this 10-year-old external hard drive you've left plugged into it, and now the system's trying to boot from that or talk to it and communicate with it every time you restart the system, and it's old. And it's slowing your entire machine down because you're like, well, it's old, but it works. Why don't I keep using it? And then you end up with this problem where you can't figure out why the heck your computer's taken 2 or 3 minutes to boot. That usually results in an email to me, and I say, if you've got anything USB in that computer, except your keyboard and mouse, take it out. Hey, that fixed it. It turns out it was an old USB. I mean, I've heard that so many times. So holding on to older equipment, and especially if you're carrying it over to new equipment, like you bought a brand new computer, but you're going to keep that 10-year-old external drive, you are more likely going to have a problem mixing old and new technology. And it's the old technology that statistically is likely going to fail first based on age alone. It's older. So whatever remaining life has got left is diminished compared to the brand new equipment you bought. I think this is important to consider when you're making these decisions, so that when this happens, and it will, if you decide that you want to carry over some old hardware, the first place you need to look the first time you have a problem is look at the old hardware first. 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's that old hardware. And that money you saved by continuing to use that old hardware, you're paying for it in time and frustration. And it usually happens at the worst possible time, like on some day where you absolutely had to have the computer, you had a job interview, you had some obligation, and the computer's been running fine, and now suddenly, what the heck? It's Murphy's Law. It happens that way all the time. Ask me how I know. I've made a career out of fixing computers where that's the scenario, and people are desperate to get their machines up and running. It can be a little stressful. Customers put that pressure on you. I need this fixed immediately, and I need it fixed cheap, and I want it fixed right, and I don't want it to break again anytime soon. And then I hope that by sharing these experiences with you online, that you are able to remedy your own problems more so than before you had the information I provide. There's still going to be problems where it has to go to a tech for certain kinds of diagnostics. But if it's something simple like what we did here, and by empowering you with the knowledge to know what to look for, you could save yourself not only some money from having somebody else look at it for a fee, but you could have it up and running faster rather than, if you take it to a tech or you have a tech come out to you, generally speaking, working techs aren't sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. You have to be put on a schedule. So you might make the call today, and they say, the soonest I can come out will be Thursday or something, In the meantime, you could potentially fix it yourself at 1 o'clock in the morning. You're not on overtime. And then avoid all those expenses and delays. But just things to consider. So I'm not suggesting what you should do, but rather what you should consider looking forward, looking ahead on what the consequences are of how you want to. So we're still having some connection issues here. I just saw OBS, it dropped me. Once again, I don't know if the ISP is having some difficulties or they're doing some maintenance. It's pretty unusual. They normally would do maintenance at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. But remember how I talked about, it's all about timing. The internet's been up and fine while I haven't been broadcasting the entire time. I've only been broadcasting for an hour and 42 minutes, and the internet's gone down twice. So there you go. It's just, I don't know, life happens that way. But at least the second time it wasn't down very long. So if you have any questions for me for right now, I'll be happy to take your questions. I just want you to know what my intentions are, why I even did this. The customer doesn't want it back. They never want to see it again. So this really could have just gone in the recycle bin, but I thought, because I put so much time and effort into it three or 4 years ago, I think it was about 3 years ago, I wouldn't have done that unless I thought the machine was worth fixing up. And knowing that Windows 10 is still good until October of 2025, I know this machine has 3 years in it to go. And, that may be all somebody needs until they're at a better financial position to get a better machine, or as a side machine to use for, you know, kids remote learning or something where you don't want to put a lot of money into it and the kids are going to be out of school in a few years. So assuming they're of that age or whatever. So there's justifiable reasons to keep a machine like this around until it's no longer useful, which will be October 14th of 2025. After that, if you want to play around with a different operating system like Linux, of course, Linux is becoming more and more a target of viruses, which is to be expected. One of the reasons Linux was relatively free of viruses was it just wasn't in much use. But as more and more people adopt it, and as it becomes more popular, it becomes a bigger target for attackers. There's nothing about it that makes it virus-free as far as how it's written or the way it's written. Every operating system can have a virus. Every operating system can have a man-in-the-middle attack regardless, or, you know, DNS poisoning and things like that. So be aware that the promotions of Linux being virus-free are a bit exaggerated, and again, the more people jump to Linux, the bigger of a impact. All right, so again, I think the internet service provider is trying to send me a clue. Anyway, decide what actions you want to take that are right for you. Understand the risks and the benefits, and then you calculate out how much time and how much money you're willing to put into something of a certain age that has a limited life, and what it's worth to you to do it. And so it's going to be a different answer for everybody. Sometimes it's just time to let things go financially. It'd be cheaper. You know, this machine's already had money put into it 3 years ago. It was expensive to begin with, and now it needs money put into it again. If it was a brand new machine, it would be good for, if it's a machine like what I build, it'll be good for about a minimum of 8 years, typically with not a single problem as far as any hardware failure goes, typically. So if you calculate that out over the cost of 8 years, it may end up being cheaper than having to put money in and deal with the downtime and inconvenience of an older machine. And then finding the parts can also be more difficult. The harder the parts are to find, the more expensive the parts are. There's nothing that makes older components worth more other than they're more rare. So an older CPU that's no longer manufactured, but you have to have it for some, I don't know, maybe it runs something in an office and the cost of replacing it would require replacing a bunch of other stuff. So buying a CPU makes sense, but then you might find out that that old obsolete CPU sells for more than it sold for when it was new. And it's not because it's valuable. It's simply because the seller knows there's not many of these available for sale anymore. And the seller knows it's probably not going to sell anytime soon. And they'll put a listing up for a year or longer. It just takes one buyer to pay that outrageous price to justify it. Supply and demand. Mira Ora contributed $10, said, second super chat of the night about the Linux being attacked. They are mainly going after servers. There's more reward for their effort. That's true, but they're also going after desktops. So again, it used to be people would say, oh, they don't write viruses for Linux. But that wasn't true even then. It was just very rare. All I'm saying is it's becoming more common, and it will continue to become more common. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. I think I might have missed a couple of super chats. If I did, I apologize for not shouting it out. I see Mira Ora contributed $10 earlier, says, hey, Carrie, have a great vacation. Thank you. Thank you, Mira Ora. And Nicholas Menard, thank you for your contribution. And there was another one up here, which is scrolled off the screen, and I don't have it on my viewer activity tab. But if I missed you, let me know, and I'll certainly give you the shout out. I got a text from the neighbors saying they're changing an amplifier. Oh, the internet service provider? Lawn Dog said this was a great entertaining video with a lot of interaction with the chat room participants. We all had a blast. Right on. Well, that's what we're trying to do here. Share an experience, share it together, learn together. Not here to argue, not here to fight, not here to prove how smart we are. Just prove how nice we are, to prove how friendly we are. That, to me, is the what's the word? Just the very basis foundation behind this community are kind people. Sometimes we get people in and they want to try to impress us with how smart they are or challenge us. And it's not a friendly way to run a community. And I appreciate all of you guys in the chat today. I did open the chat up for subscribers today. So that's, if there's been any issues in the chat, I haven't seen it. So we're good there. DJ Big Red contributes $4.99. Says Cox is working on the amplifier down the street. The internet is going in and out all night. So DJ Big Red is a neighbor to me here at Studio B. Thank you, DJ Big Red, for the update. Clearly, I know something's going on with Cox, but it's just weird to me that last night we had that big storm. Not a problem. Today, it's great, and the internet keeps going down. So maybe I should quit while I'm ahead, because I'm sure that based on what DJ Big Red is telling me, we're probably going to have a few more outages tonight. So we got it done.